Hi, I'm Michael Zhang, and this is the story of how my brother's attempt to hide my embarrassing restaurant from his elite clients led to an unexpected twist that changed both our lives forever. Sometimes, the things people look down on turn out to be their biggest mistakes. Growing up in San Francisco's bustling Chinatown, food was always at the heart of our family. Our parents ran a small noodle shop, working 16 hours a day to put my brother Kevin and me through school. Kevin went to culinary school in Paris, dreaming of Michelin stars and elite clientele. I stayed home, learning our grandmother's recipes and helping in the family shop. "You're wasting your potential," Kevin would say during his rare visits home. "Street food will always be street food." But I saw something in those humble recipes that others didn't. After our parents retired, I transformed their noodle shop into Heritage Kitchen. We served street food, yes, but with a twist. Each dish told a story of our family's journey, of immigrants who carried their flavors across oceans. While Kevin worked his way up through five-star restaurants, eventually opening his own upscale establishment, Maison K, in Nob Hill, I experimented with our grandmother's recipes. I created tasting menus that combined street food techniques with premium ingredients, each dish paired with a story from our family's history. Our parents were proud of both of us, but they preferred eating at my restaurant. "It tastes like home," Mom would say, making Kevin frown. Then came the dinner that changed everything. Kevin was hosting a private event for Silicon Valley executives and their celebrity guests. Mom insisted he invite me. "Fine," he sighed. "But please, Michael, wear something proper. And don't mention your establishment." I arrived at Maison K wearing my best suit, feeling out of place among the designer dresses and custom tuxedos. Kevin was working the room, charming his elite clientele with tales of his training in Paris. "And your brother?" a famous actress asked Kevin, having overheard we were family. "Is he in the culinary world too?" Kevin's smile tightened. "Oh, Michael, he's exploring other opportunities." "Actually," I started to say, but Kevin cut me off. "Let's not bore everyone with that," he laughed nervously. "It's rather embarrassing, really. Just a street food place in Chinatown. Nothing like what we do here." The actress, Claire Montgomery, America's sweetheart and known food enthusiast, raised an eyebrow. "Street food? In Chinatown?" "Heritage Kitchen," I said quietly, ignoring Kevin's glare. "We specialize in traditional Chinese street food with a modern twist." "How fascinating." Claire leaned forward, genuinely interested. "I love authentic street food. The real stories, the real flavors." Kevin quickly steered the conversation back to his latest truffle-infused creation. But I noticed Claire glancing at me thoughtfully throughout dinner. Later that night, Kevin pulled me aside. "What were you thinking? These people are here for fine dining, not some street food story. Our food has value, Kevin. Our story has value." "Story?" he scoffed. "I built my reputation on excellence, not sentimental stories about grandmother's cooking. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have my brother running a glorified food truck menu?" I left early, his words stinging more than I wanted to admit. But as I walked through my quiet restaurant that night, looking at the family photos on the walls and the worn recipe book our grandmother had passed down, I felt a strange sense of calm. What Kevin didn't know was that I had spent years developing something special, a secret tasting menu called The Immigrant's Journey. 20 courses, each telling part of our family's story through food. Premium ingredients meeting street food techniques, tradition meeting innovation. I'd never advertised it, It was only for those who understood the value of such stories. At $15,000 per table, it was as expensive as any fine dining experience in the city. But it wasn't about the money. It was about honoring our heritage while pushing culinary boundaries. As I locked up that night, my phone buzzed with a message request on Instagram. The verified account made me pause. At Claire Montgomery, your brother wouldn't give me your contact info, but I found you. That conversation about street food made me curious. Would love to experience your restaurant's real story. Is tomorrow available? I smiled as I typed my response, thinking about Kevin's dismissive words. Tomorrow would bring changes that none of them saw coming. After all, sometimes the best stories are the ones people try to silence. The next morning, I arrived at Heritage Kitchen earlier than usual. My team and I spent hours preparing for what would become the most important service of our lives. As I carefully laid out grandmother's recipe book, my phone buzzed with angry messages from Kevin. How dare you DM Claire? She's my client. Do you know how this makes me look? I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on preparing the first course of the immigrant's journey. A single xiaolongbao dumpling served on grandmother's antique spoon, the only possession she managed to bring from China. At 7 p.m. sharp, Claire Montgomery arrived. Not alone, but with her entire production team. They were in San Francisco filming her new cooking documentary series. Hope you don't mind, she smiled, gesturing to the cameras. When you mentioned your family story last night, I knew it was exactly what we've been looking for. Real food, real stories. Kevin burst through the door moments later, face flushed. Claire, there must be some mistake. If you're looking for authentic Chinese cuisine, Maison K has a wonderful Asian fusion menu. Kevin, Claire cut him off politely. I've had enough fusion. Tonight, I want to hear your family's real story. What followed was a 4-hour journey through our family's history, told through 20 meticulously crafted courses. Each dish came with a story, a memory, a piece of our heritage. The first course, that single xiaolongbao, brought tears to Claire's eyes as I explained how grandmother used to make them on her precious spoon during the hard early days in America. One dumpling at a time, I explained, she built a new life. Course after course, the cameras rolled as Claire and her team experienced our family's journey. The twice-cooked pork belly, prepared according to grandmother's secret recipe, but served with 25-year-aged black vinegar. The hand-pulled noodles, made with specialty wheat from the same province our family came from. Kevin stood in the corner, watching as his celebrity client became increasingly enchanted with each dish and story. His perfectly curated image of fine dining was being overshadowed by the authenticity he tried so hard to hide. The final course was a modern interpretation of the simple noodle soup our parents had served in their shop. Handmade noodles in a 48-hour bone broth, topped with a 5 Wagyu beef and century-old pure tea leaves. But it was served in the chipped bowls our parents had used for years. A reminder of where we came from. This, Claire announced to the cameras, wiping tears from her eyes, is what real cooking is about. Not just technique or premium ingredients, but heart, story, heritage. Then she turned to me. Michael, would you be interested in being the first featured chef in our new series? We want to showcase chefs who are preserving cultural heritage through food. Kevin's face went pale. But what about Maison K? We discussed. Kevin, Claire said gently, your restaurant is beautiful, and your technique is impeccable. But this is what audiences are hungry for. Authenticity. Real stories. The next morning, the food world exploded. Claire posted about her experience, calling it the most meaningful meal of my life. The $15,000 tasting menu was booked solid for the next year. Food critics who had ignored us in favor of trendy fusion restaurants suddenly couldn't wait to experience the immigrant's journey. Kevin showed up at Heritage Kitchen 3 days later during prep time. He stood awkwardly in the kitchen, watching as I taught my staff grandmother's technique for folding dumplings. "I was wrong," he finally said, voice cracking. I was so focused on proving myself to the fine dining world that I forgot what made our family's food special in the first place. "It's not too late to remember," I replied, handing him a dumpling wrapper. Today, 2 years later, Heritage Kitchen has 3 Michelin stars. Not that we needed them. Kevin closed Maison K and opened a new restaurant next door to mine, called Remember. He serves elevated versions of our parents' original noodle shop menu, finally embracing his heritage. Claire's documentary series, Hidden Kitchens, became a global hit. Our episode, which told the story of 2 brothers taking different paths to honor the same heritage, won an Emmy. Last week, during a rare quiet moment, Kevin and I sat in my kitchen after hours, eating simple noodle soup from our parents' chipped bowls. "Remember when you called this place embarrassing?" I asked. He laughed, but his eyes were serious. I was embarrassed of myself, really, of thinking I had to erase our history to be successful. The old recipe book sits proudly displayed in both our restaurants now, and grandmother's spoon still serves the first course of the immigrant's journey. But the most valuable thing being served is the reminder that success isn't about hiding who you are. It's about having the courage to share your authentic story with the world. As for that infamous dinner where Kevin tried to hide my embarrassing restaurant, we recreated it for the documentary's finale, this time with both brothers proudly telling their shared story. Sometimes, the things people try to hide become the very things that set them free. Mom and Dad still prefer eating at my place, but now they split their time between both restaurants, proud that their sons finally understood what they knew all along, that the most precious ingredient in any dish is the heritage it carries. And that worn recipe book? It's being published next month, featuring dishes and stories from both Heritage Kitchen and Remember. Because sometimes, the most powerful way to move forward is to remember where you came from, even if some people need a $15,000 tasting menu to help them see it.
I never expected my family to betray me, but standing in that mahogany panel boardroom, watching Uncle James's face turn purple with rage, I realized blood isn't always thicker than water. "You have no right to be here, Alexandra," Uncle James spat, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent room. "Security, escort my niece out immediately." The 2 security guards hesitated, looking uncomfortable. They'd known me since I was a little girl running through these same halls. Before they could move, I held up my hand. "Actually, as a major shareholder of Blackwell Enterprises, I have every right to attend this meeting." I kept my voice steady, despite the hammering of my heart against my ribs, especially when the topic concerns the missing $4.7 million from our company accounts. Let me back up. My name is Alexandra Blackwell, and until 3 months ago, I was the CFO of Blackwell Enterprises, the company my grandfather built from nothing into a $200 million construction and real estate development firm. When my father died unexpectedly last year, I stepped up to help run the family business alongside my uncle, who became CEO. What I discovered in those financial records kept me awake for weeks. Growing up in the Blackwell family meant understanding our legacy. My grandfather, Richard Blackwell, started with a single truck and a dream in 1965. By the time I was born, Blackwell Enterprises had built half the skyline of our city. My earliest memories are of sitting on my father's knee in his office, helping him review blueprints. "Remember, Alex," my father would say, his voice gentle but firm. This company isn't just about buildings, it's about trust. People trust us with their dreams. I took those words to heart. After getting my MBA, I joined the company, working my way through every department. No special treatment, that was my father's rule. You'll earn respect by knowing this business inside and out, he insisted. And I did. By 30, I was the company's youngest CFO, working alongside my father, who had taken over as CEO after Grandpa's retirement. We made a good team. Dad was the visionary, beloved by clients and employees alike. I was the pragmatic one, watching the numbers, ensuring our growth remained sustainable. Then came the accident. A routine inspection at one of our construction sites, something Dad insisted on doing personally every month. The scaffolding collapse was ruled an accident, but it left Blackwell Enterprises without its heart and soul. At the funeral, Uncle James put his arm around my shoulders. "Don't worry, Alex. We'll get through this together." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father's brother, my godfather, the man who taught me to ride a bike and brought me ice cream when I had my tonsils removed. I trusted him completely. 2 weeks after the funeral, the board appointed Uncle James as CEO. It made sense. He'd been COO for years, working alongside my father. I remained as CFO, grateful for the continuity during such a difficult time. The first few months were a blur of grief and work. I threw myself into the company, determined to honor my father's legacy. Uncle James seemed to do the same, working late, taking meetings with new clients, expanding our operations. It was during the quarterly financial review that I first noticed something odd. A series of payments to a company I'd never heard of, Oceanic Consulting Group. 5 transfers over 3 months, totaling $4.7 million. What's Oceanic Consulting? I asked during our executive meeting. Uncle James barely looked up from his tablet. New consultants, they're helping us expand into the Asian market. I don't remember approving that expenditure, I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The board approved it in executive session. You were at your mother's that week, remember? We didn't want to bother you with paperwork while you were caring for her. It sounded reasonable. Mom had taken Dad's death hard, and I had spent a week at her house, making sure she ate and took her medication. Still, something felt off. Later that day, I asked Diane, our corporate secretary, for the minutes from that executive session. What executive session? She asked, confusion wrinkling her brow. That night, I stayed late, digging through financial records. Oceanic Consulting Group had been incorporated just 3 months ago. Its registered address was a virtual office in the Cayman Islands. Its sole director was listed as JB Holdings. JB Holdings, James Blackwell Holdings. My uncle was embezzling from our family company. I spent the next week gathering evidence, carefully documenting every irregular transaction. There were more than just the payments to Oceanic. Project budgets with inflated materials costs. Subcontractors that existed only on paper. Properties purchased at suspicious discounts, then resold to shell companies at massive markups. In total, nearly $12 million had been siphoned from Blackwell Enterprises in the 9 months since my father's death. The night before I planned to take my findings to the board, I received a call from Patricia Winters, the board's chairperson and my father's oldest friend. "Alexandra, I need to see you in my office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. It's urgent." Her tone sent a chill down my spine. "What's this about, Patty?" A pause. "It's better we discuss it in person." I arrived the next morning to find not just Patricia, but the entire executive committee waiting. Uncle James sat at Patricia's right hand, his expression grave but with a glint of something that looked uncomfortably like triumph in his eyes. "Alexandra," Patricia began, her voice formal in a way it had never been before. "Serious allegations have been brought to the board's attention concerning financial irregularities under your supervision as CFO." I felt like I'd been punched. "What?" She slid a folder across the table. "These documents show systematic mismanagement of company funds, possibly rising to the level of embezzlement." My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were doctored versions of the very transactions I'd been investigating, but altered to make it appear I was the one responsible. "This is impossible," I said, looking up at the grim faces around the table. "These records have been falsified." "We've had 2 independent auditors review them," said Martin Green, another board member. "The evidence is quite compelling, Alexandra." I looked at my uncle, who was watching me with an expression of sad disappointment so perfect it must have been rehearsed. "James is behind this," I said flatly. "He's been stealing from the company for months. I have proof." "Alex," Uncle James interrupted softly, "I know you're under a lot of stress since Robert's passing. We all are. But this, accusing me to deflect from your own actions, it's beneath you." Given the seriousness of these allegations, Patricia continued, "The board has voted to suspend you from your duties pending a full investigation. We'll need your company credentials and devices before you leave today." I looked around the table at these people who had known me my entire life. People who had watched me grow up, who had attended my college graduation, who had mourned with me at my father's funeral. And not one of them was willing to consider that I might be innocent. Except I noticed my father's old friend Gerald Thompson, who sat silently at the end of the table, his brow furrowed in thought. I stood dignity, the only thing I had left. "You're making a terrible mistake, and you'll regret it." As I walked out, leaving my company laptop and badge behind, Uncle James caught up with me at the elevator. "Alex, wait." I turned, hope flaring briefly that perhaps this was all a misunderstanding. Instead, he leaned in close. "You should have stayed focused on the numbers and left the big decisions to me. Your father always knew you weren't cut out for real leadership." The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, my mind reeling from his words. "Enjoy your early retirement," he called as the doors closed between us. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. The investigation dragged on, carefully managed by my uncle to keep me away from the company. The board froze my shares, preventing me from voting or selling them. My professional reputation was in tatters. No one wanted to hire a CFO accused of embezzlement. But I wasn't idle. I still had friends within Blackwell Enterprises, people loyal to my father and suspicious of how quickly James had turned against me. Through them, I continued gathering evidence, building my case piece by painstaking piece. I also reached out to Gerald Thompson, the one board member who hadn't seemed convinced of my guilt. We met at his fishing cabin, well away from prying eyes. "I always thought something wasn't right about your father's accident," Gerald said as we sat on his deck, watching the sunset over the lake. The safety protocols at that site were state-of-the-art. Robert personally oversaw their installation. A chill ran through me. "You think it wasn't an accident?" Gerald sighed heavily. "I don't know, Alex. But I do know your uncle started making moves to consolidate power almost immediately afterward. Too quickly, like he was working from a playbook." "Help me, Gerald," I said. "Help me get back into that boardroom." That's how I found myself standing before the Blackwell Enterprises board 3 months after my suspension, uninvited but undeterred, with a flash drive of evidence in my hand and Gerald Thompson at my side. The quarterly shareholders meeting is a matter of public record. Gerald had reminded the security guards who tried to stop me. Maz Blackwell remains a major shareholder, regardless of her employment status. Now, facing down my uncle's rage and the board's shock, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "I have proof," I said, holding up the flash drive, "that not only clears my name but shows exactly where that missing $4.7 million went, and the other $7.3 million that's disappeared since then." Uncle James laughed, but I could see the fear behind his eyes. "This is absurd. The board has already seen the evidence against you. They've seen what you wanted them to see," I countered. "Forged documents, manipulated records. But what they haven't seen is this." I nodded to Gerald, who connected the flash drive to the projection system. On the screen appeared banking records, incorporation documents, property transfers, all meticulously organized and annotated. "Oceanic Consulting Group," I began, "is owned by JB Holdings, which in turn is owned by James Blackwell. That $4.7 million was transferred directly into my uncle's personal accounts." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Uncle James shouted over the din, his face contorted with rage. "This is slander. She fabricated all of this. She's trying to save herself by destroying me." Patricia Winters rapped her gavel sharply. "Order. We will have order." When the room quieted, she turned to me. "Alexandra, these are serious accusations. How can we verify this information?" I smiled for the first time in months. I anticipated that question. That's why I took the liberty of inviting representatives from Deloitte's Forensic Accounting Division to today's meeting. They're waiting outside with a court order authorizing them to access Blackwell's financial systems. Uncle James lunged across the table toward me, but security, the same guards who had hesitated to remove me earlier, quickly restrained him. "You'll regret this," he hissed, echoing my words from 3 months ago. "I don't think I will," I replied calmly. The next 4 hours were tense as the forensic accountants worked. The board members waited, and Uncle James sat fuming under the watchful eye of security. I knew what they would find, not just evidence of embezzlement, but something even more damning. When the lead accountant returned, her expression was grave. "We've confirmed Ms. Blackwell's allegations. The funds were indeed transferred to entities controlled by Mr. James Blackwell." A collective gasp went through the room. "Furthermore," she continued, "we found evidence that Mr. Blackwell has been systematically falsifying safety inspection reports at multiple construction sites, including the one where Robert Blackwell died last year." The room went completely silent. I felt a cold numbness spread through me as the implication became clear. Patricia's voice shook as she asked, "Are you saying?" "I'm saying there's enough evidence here to warrant a criminal investigation into both financial crimes and possible negligent homicide," the accountant confirmed. Uncle James suddenly bolted for the door, shoving aside a security guard. He might have made it too, if not for the 2 police detectives who had just arrived, alerted by the forensic accounting team as soon as they uncovered evidence of criminal activity. As they led my uncle away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with me one last time. The hatred there would have scared me once. Now I just felt pity. "The board needs to convene an emergency session," Patricia announced, her voice steadier now. "Alexandra, would you give us the room?" I nodded and stepped outside, emotionally exhausted but vindicated. Gerald joined me in the hallway. "Your father would be proud," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "You fought for the truth, just like he always did." An hour later, Patricia emerged from the boardroom. "The board has voted unanimously to reinstate you, Alexandra, not as CFO, but as acting CEO, effective immediately. We have a lot of damage to repair, both to the company and to your reputation. We're deeply sorry for failing you." I thought about declining. After everything that had happened, part of me wanted nothing more to do with Blackwell Enterprises. But then I remembered all the employees who depended on the company, all the projects my father had been passionate about, the legacy my grandfather had built. "I accept," I said finally, "on one condition." "Name it." "We established the Robert Blackwell Memorial Fund for Construction Safety, funded by recovering every penny my uncle stole." Patricia smiled, tears in her eyes. "Consider it done." The next few months weren't easy. The company's reputation took a hit when the scandal became public. Several projects had to be delayed while we conducted proper safety reviews. The legal proceedings against my uncle revealed even more corruption than I had uncovered. But we survived. More than that, we emerged stronger, more transparent, more committed to the values my father and grandfather had instilled in the company from the beginning. A year after that dramatic boardroom confrontation, I stood on the podium at the opening ceremony for Blackwell Plaza, the downtown revitalization project that had been my father's dream. As I cut the ribbon, I spotted my mother in the front row, smiling through her tears. "This building stands as a testament to the Blackwell legacy," I told the gathered crowd. "Not just of construction excellence, but of integrity, perseverance, and truth." Some tried to steal that legacy, but they discovered what I've always known, that a foundation built on lies will inevitably crumble. Later, walking through the completed building with Gerald, I paused at the memorial plaque honoring my father. "Do you ever regret it?" Gerald asked. "Coming back that day, facing down your uncle, taking on the company?" I thought about it, remembering the fear, the isolation, the sleepless nights. Then I thought about the employees whose jobs I'd saved, the safety measures now in place protecting our workers, the restored integrity of the company my family had built. Not for a second, I answered truthfully. My father always said that Blackwell Enterprises isn't just about buildings, it's about trust. Rebuilding that trust was worth everything it cost me. As we continued our tour, I greeted employees by name, listened to their ideas, shared in their pride at what we'd accomplished together. My uncle had been wrong about me, wrong about leadership. Real leadership isn't about power or control. It's about service, about standing up for what's right, especially when it's difficult. That night, I sat in my father's old office, my office now, looking out at the city skyline we had helped shape. On my desk sat a framed photo of 3 generations of Blackwells. My grandfather, my father, and me standing before the company's first major project. "We did it, Dad," I whispered to the quiet room. "We saved the company. We protected your legacy." And somewhere deep inside, I felt his approval, his pride, his love, stronger than betrayal, more enduring than grief, the true inheritance he had left me. I stood at the window of my penthouse office, watching the sunset paint the city's skyline in shades of gold. Below me, Chicago's financial district hummed with end-of-day activity, but my mind was fixed on tomorrow's meeting, a real estate closing that would change everything. My name is Sophia Mitchell, though my family hasn't used that name in nearly a decade. To them, I'm just the disappointment, the daughter who wasn't worth their time or investment. But tomorrow, they'll learn that I'm also the anonymous owner of Mitchell Real Estate Holdings, the company they're desperately trying to buy their dream house from. "Ms. Mitchell," my assistant Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "The final paperwork for tomorrow's closing just arrived, and your sister posted another photo of the house on Instagram." I turned from the window, accepting the folder Sarah held out. "Let me guess, another post about their perfect future home." Sarah nodded, pulling up the post on her tablet. There it was, a sweeping shot of the Georgian mansion I purchased 3 years ago, accompanied by my sister Diana's gushing caption, "One more day until this beauty is ours. Mom and Dad's dream house. They deserve this after all their hard work. #bless #$1,000,000 listing #DreamMom." The irony wasn't lost on me. The house they thought they were buying tomorrow had been mine for years. I purchased it specifically because I knew it was exactly what they'd always wanted, the sprawling mansion in Lake Forest, with its manicured gardens and lake views, the perfect showcase for their supposed success. "They still have no idea you own it?" Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. She'd been with me since the beginning, watching my plan unfold with patient understanding. "No," I replied, settling behind my desk. "They still think Mitchell Real Estate Holdings is owned by some mysterious businessman they've never met. Just like they think their daughter is probably still struggling to make ends meet somewhere." The truth was far different from what they imagined. After they cut me off 10 years ago, I hadn't crumbled as they'd expected. Instead, I built something they couldn't even dream of, a real estate empire that now controlled some of the most valuable properties in Chicago. The memory of that final night in their house still burned clear in my mind. I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree they'd barely acknowledge. Diana, my younger sister by 2 years, had just dropped out of her 3rd attempt at college. But somehow that was different. She was finding herself. I was just a disappointment. "We need to focus our resources on Diana right now," my father had announced over dinner. "She needs our support to figure out her path. You understand, don't you, Sophia? You're the responsible one after all." Those words, "the responsible one," had always been their excuse to ignore me. Being responsible meant I didn't need attention, didn't need support, didn't need anything. Diana was the fragile one, the special one, the one who needed everything. "We're cutting off your trust fund," my mother added, not even looking up from her plate. "Diana needs that money for her fresh start. You have a job, you'll be fine." My job at the time was an entry-level position at a small real estate firm. The pay was barely enough to cover a shared apartment in a decent neighborhood. My trust fund had been my safety net, my chance to build something of my own. "You're taking my trust fund, my inheritance from Grandpa, and giving it to Diana." I remember how steady my voice had been, even as my world crumbled. "The money he specifically left for me?" My father's face hardened. "Your grandfather didn't understand family dynamics. Diana needs this more than you do. If you can't support what's best for this family, maybe you should leave." So I did. I packed my bags that night and walked out of their sprawling suburban home, ignoring my mother's dramatic sighs and Diana's smug smile. They expected me to come crawling back within months, begging for help and admitting they were right. Instead, I threw myself into work. My entry-level job became my education in real estate. I learned everything I could: property values, market trends, investment strategies. I worked overtime, took on extra projects, made myself indispensable to my bosses. But the real turning point came 6 months after I left home. A small envelope arrived at my tiny apartment containing a key and a letter. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize. "Dear Ms. Mitchell," the letter began. Per the instructions of your late grandfather, Harold Mitchell, this letter and its contents are to be delivered to you 6 months after any attempt by your parents to divert or withdraw the trust fund he established for you. My hands shook as I read on. Grandpa Harold, it seemed, had known my parents better than they'd known themselves. He'd set up a second, secret trust for me, one they'd never known about. The key belonged to a safety deposit box containing documents for offshore accounts, property deeds, and investment portfolios worth far more than the trust fund my parents had taken. Your parents, the letter continued in my grandfather's familiar handwriting, never understood the value of building something for yourself. They coast on inherited wealth and social status, teaching your sister the same habits. But I've watched you, Sophia. You have the same drive I had, the same understanding that true success comes from creating, not just spending. This is your chance to build something remarkable. Don't waste it trying to win their approval. It's not worth having. That night, I sat on my shabby couch until sunrise, formulating a plan. With the resources my grandfather had left me, I could do more than just survive. I could create something extraordinary. But I would do it quietly, secretly, building an empire in silence while my family continued to dismiss me. I started small, using a portion of the funds to buy distressed properties, renovate them, and sell for profit. Each success led to a larger opportunity. I hired Sarah as my assistant, then started adding more staff as my company grew. I created Mitchell Real Estate Holdings under layers of corporate anonymity, ensuring my name would never appear in public records. Within 5 years, my company owned prime real estate throughout Chicago. High-rises, luxury condos, commercial properties, all generating massive profits that I reinvested into further expansion. I moved from my shabby apartment to a sleek penthouse, though I kept this hidden from my family during our increasingly rare interactions. They didn't want to see my success, so they didn't. At holiday gatherings, they barely asked about my life, preferring to focus on Diana's latest adventures. She tried being a yoga instructor, a social media influencer, a life coach, each venture funded by my parents, each one failing within months. Still in real estate, my mother would ask dismissively, as if I were selling timeshares instead of building an empire. Well, I suppose it's stable work. Diana's starting a wellness consulting business. Isn't that exciting? I'd smile and nod, never mentioning that I just closed a $100 million deal or that my company was now one of the largest property owners in the city. Let them think I was struggling. Let them believe their decision to cut me off had kept me down. 3 years ago, I learned through business channels that my parents had started looking for their dream house. They'd always talked about it, a historic mansion in Lake Forest, overlooking Lake Michigan. It had to be Georgian style, had to have at least 8 bedrooms, had to have formal gardens and a circular driveway. When the perfect property came on the market, I bought it immediately through one of my shell companies. I knew they weren't ready to buy yet. They were still funding Diana's failed ventures, but I could wait. I kept the house maintained, empty, perfect, knowing they would eventually come looking. And now, after 3 years, they finally had the money. They'd spent the past month bragging to everyone about their perfect find, never questioning why such an immaculate property had been sitting empty, waiting for them. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., they would arrive at my office, though they didn't know it was mine, ready to sign the papers and claim their dream home. They'd spent weeks dealing with my company through intermediaries, never once suspecting that the mysterious owner they were buying from was their own daughter. Sarah placed a stack of documents on my desk, pulling me back to the present. "These need your signature before tomorrow's closing," she said. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It's not too late to send another representative." I picked up my pen, thinking of all the dismissive comments, the years of being ignored, the way they'd thrown me away to focus on Diana. "No," I said firmly. "I want to be there. I want to see their faces when they realize what they've been dealing with all along." I began signing the papers, each signature bringing me closer to tomorrow's revelation. The daughter they'd dismissed as a failure would be revealed as the owner of not just their dream house, but an entire real estate empire. The child they pushed aside would be exposed as the successful business owner they'd been trying to impress. "Should I clear your schedule for the rest of tomorrow?" Sarah asked, a knowing look in her eye. "In case there's fallout?" I nodded, tucking the signed papers back into their folder. "Clear the whole day. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." As Sarah left my office, I turned back to the window. The sun had set completely now, leaving the city awash in artificial light, somewhere out in Lake Forest. My parents and Diana were probably planning their move into their perfect new home, never suspecting that tomorrow's closing would change everything they thought they knew about their forgotten daughter. I pulled out my phone and opened Diana's Instagram post again, studying the proud faces of my parents posed in front of my house. They looked so confident, so certain of their position in the world. In less than 24 hours, that confidence would shatter. Let them enjoy their last night of believing they'd won. Tomorrow they'd learn what their responsible daughter had really been doing all these years. Tomorrow, they'd discover that the child they'd cast aside had become more successful than they could imagine. Tomorrow, they'd finally understand what they'd thrown away 10 years ago. The morning of the closing dawned clear and bright. I arrived at my office 2 hours early, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan while Sarah arranged the conference room exactly as I had specified. Every detail had to be perfect. "Your parents' car just pulled into the parking garage," Sarah announced at 9:45. "They're with Diana and their lawyer, Richard Thompson." I smiled slightly. Richard Thompson had been my parents' lawyer for 20 years, handling everything from their investments to their social embarrassments. He'd been the one to formalize my removal from their lives a decade ago. "Put them in the small waiting room," I instructed. "Let them sit there for exactly 15 minutes before bringing them up." It was petty, perhaps, but I wanted them to stew a bit. Let them experience what it felt like to be kept waiting, to feel less important than they thought they were. Through the security cameras, I watched them fidget in the waiting room. My father, James Mitchell, looked distinguished as ever in his tailored suit, though his hair had gone completely gray. My mother, Patricia, was dressed for what she clearly thought would be a society photo opportunity, complete with pearls and an elaborate updo. Diana lounged on the expensive sofa, scrolling through her phone, looking bored with the whole process. At exactly 10 o'clock a.m., Sarah led them into the main elevator, using her special key to access the penthouse floor. I stood in my office, counting the seconds until the inevitable moment. The elevator doors opened and I heard my mother's appreciative gasp at the stunning view of Chicago's skyline. Sarah led them down the hallway toward the conference room, their footsteps muffled by plush carpeting. "The owner will be joining us shortly," Sarah informed them, her voice professional and calm. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." Through the glass walls of my office, I watched them settle into the conference room. My father immediately took the power position at the head of the table, while my mother fussed with her hair in the reflection of the windows. Diana slumped into a chair, already looking at her phone again. At 10:05 exactly, I opened my office door and walked into the conference room. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for. My father's face went from polite expectation to shock to a sickly pale color in the span of seconds. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, her carefully maintained social mask cracking. Diana actually dropped her phone, her mouth hanging open in a most unladylike way. "Good morning," I said calmly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table from my father. "I believe we're here to discuss the sale of 1847 Lakeshore Drive." Richard Thompson recovered first, his legal training kicking in. "Sophia, you work here?" I smiled, letting the moment stretch out painfully. "Actually, I own here. Mitchell Real Estate Holdings is my company. Has been for the past 8 years. My father found his voice, though it shook slightly. "That's impossible. This company owns half of Chicago's premium real estate. You couldn't." "Couldn't what, Dad?" I asked softly. "Couldn't build a successful business? Couldn't become more wealthy and powerful than you ever were? Couldn't own the house you've been desperate to buy?" My mother's face had gone from shocked to calculating. "Darling," she started, her voice honey sweet. "Why didn't you tell us? We're family, we should." "Family?" I cut her off. "You mean the family that took away my trust fund? The family that kicked me out and told me to never come back unless I supported their decisions? That family?" Diana finally spoke up, her voice shrill. "This isn't fair. You're just trying to ruin Mom and Dad's dream because you're jealous." I pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the table. "No, Diana, I'm conducting business. You see, this house you're so excited about. I bought it 3 years ago, specifically because I knew it was exactly what they wanted. I kept it empty, maintained, perfect, waiting for this moment." My father's face had turned from pale to red. "You manipulated us. Set us up for some kind of revenge plot." "Revenge?" I laughed softly. No, Dad. This is business. You taught me that family and business don't mix, remember? When you took my inheritance to fund Diana's failed ventures, well, I'm simply following your example. I opened the folder and began laying out documents. The asking price for the house is $8.5 million. You've already put down a non-refundable deposit of $850,000. However, there are some additional terms we need to discuss. Additional terms? Richard Thompson leaned forward, lawyer mode fully engaged. The terms were already negotiated. I smiled. The preliminary terms, yes. But as the owner, I reserve the right to add conditions before final sale. Unless, of course, you prefer to forfeit the deposit. My father's hands clenched into fists. What do you want, Sophia? First, I said, pulling out a document, I want you to sign this acknowledgement that the trust fund you took from me, which was explicitly left to me by grandfather, was illegally redistributed. You have two choices. Sign this and return the original amount plus 10 years of interest, or walk away from the house and lose your deposit. My mother gasped. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And that's just the first condition. I pulled out another document. This one requires you to acknowledge, in writing, that you wrongfully pushed me out of the family. It will be notarized and kept on file. Diana jumped up, her face red with anger. This is blackmail. No, I corrected calmly. This is consequences. Something this family has always shielded you from, Diana. Speaking of which, I pulled out a third document. This one is actually for you, sister dear. It's a complete accounting of every dollar Mom and Dad have given you over the past 10 years. Money that should have been mine. You can either sign a repayment agreement or you can explain to them why they're losing their dream house and their deposit. The room fell into stunned silence. My father stared at the documents, his face a mix of fury and defeat. My mother had tears running down her face, though I doubted their sincerity. Diana had collapsed back into her chair, looking lost. You have 1 hour to decide, I said, standing up. Sarah will bring you coffee and water. I'll be in my office when you've made your decision. I walked out, leaving them with the weight of their choices. Through the glass walls, I watched them argue, plead, and finally fall into resigned discussion with Richard Thompson. Exactly 58 minutes later, Sarah appeared in my office. They're ready to sign. I returned to the conference room. The atmosphere had changed. The arrogance and superiority were gone, replaced by a heavy silence. My father signed first, his hand shaking slightly as he acknowledged his theft of my trust fund. My mother went next, mascara streaked down her face as she signed the family acknowledgement. Diana was last, nearly tearing the paper as she signed the repayment agreement. Excellent, I said, gathering the signed documents. Now about the house. Just get it over with, my father growled. Name your final price. I smiled, pulling out one last document. Actually, I'm giving you the house. Free and clear, no additional payment needed. Your deposit will be returned as well. They stared at me in confusion. You see, I continued, I didn't do this for revenge. I did this so you would finally understand what you threw away 10 years ago. That house, it's worth $8.5 million. My company, it's worth over $2 billion. I'm not the failure you thought I was, and I never needed your money or your approval. I stood up, straightening my jacket. The house is yours, but our relationship isn't. I don't want your calls, your sudden desire to reconnect, or your attempts to explain. Consider this our final interaction as family. Sophia, my mother started, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The deed will be transferred to your name by the end of business today. Sarah will show you out. Goodbye. I walked out of the conference room for the last time, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I heard Diana burst into tears, my mother's attempts at soothing her, my father's heavy sigh. Sarah appeared at my office door an hour later, after they'd gone. They're gone. Your father tried to leave his business card, but I returned it to him. I nodded, looking out at the city spread below. Have their access to the building revoked. If they try to contact me, redirect them to our legal department. And the house? Sarah asked. Make sure it's transferred as promised. I keep my word, even if they never kept theirs. I turned to face her, but first, call the contractors. I'm ready to start work on that new development project in the Gold Coast. The luxury condos. The ones your father tried to bid on last month? I smiled. The very same. Let's show Chicago what Mitchell Real Estate Holdings can really do. In the years that followed, my company continued to grow. I saw my family occasionally in social media posts or society pages, always in front of that house, always trying to maintain their image of success. Diana went through 3 more failed businesses before finally settling into a role as a lifestyle influencer, whatever that meant. They tried to contact me, of course. My mother sent birthday cards to my office. Sarah returned them unopened. My father attempted to schedule business meetings. His calls never made it past the front desk. Diana even tried to ambush me at charity events. My security team was very efficient at preventing such encounters. But I had meant what I said. Our relationship as family was over. I had given them the house they always wanted, but I had kept something far more valuable: my freedom from their expectations, their judgment, and their conditional love. The view from my office still faces west toward Lake Forest, where they live in that perfect house. Sometimes when the sun sets, I can almost see its lights twinkling in the distance, but I don't feel regret or longing anymore. Instead, I feel gratitude. Gratitude to my grandfather for believing in me, gratitude to my parents for pushing me away, and most of all, gratitude to myself for becoming someone they never thought I could be. The responsible one, it turns out, did just fine on her own. Sarah sticks her head into my office, interrupting my thoughts. Your next appointment is here, the developers for the new downtown project. I turn away from the window, away from the past, and face my future. Send them in. We have work to do. After all, I have an empire to run, and it has nothing to do with the family who never believed I could build it.